Alright, we're going to be shooting a different kind of video today. This is a much longer video than anything else that I've ever uploaded. It's going to be about an hour long. If you like these epic videos... Fucking asshole kids gotta be screaming as they walk down the street. This video is going to be pretty epic. It's going to be about an hour long. I'm going to do a really rough edit on it. I'm going to leave in a lot of my mistakes, you know, where I hurt myself or I start swearing because I've made a mistake. You're going to get to see some of that stuff in this video. For the most part, it's, like I said, it could be about an hour long, and if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please post a comment about what you think of this longer video, and what you think about these... Noisy school bus. This microphone is terrible, and it will not pick me up if there's a noisy school bus driving past. So please leave me a comment to let me know what you think about this longer video, and please give it a thumbs up if you like it, or thumbs down it if you think it sucks. I'm fine with that too. As always, you can check out my Patreon. I'm going to post videos to why I'm on Patreon, so stay tuned on that one. There's a lot of interesting reasons as to why I'm over there, but we'll get to that in another video. So thanks guys, and check this out. Alright, next to me we got my 1968 Fastback. It started to have a brake failing problem on it a couple weeks ago. Well, I should say over a few months. What had happened is that the brake pedal started to get lower and lower, and it required a double pump in order to make the brakes work properly. Finally, it got to the point it required a triple pump. Once I know I needed 3, it was time to really dig into the brakes and find out what was wrong. The slave cylinders looked like they were in pretty bad shape anyway. It was time to go ahead and replace them. So I started to investigate and find out where I could get them. And everywhere they're special order, and they're about 30 bucks each. I discovered Super Beetle wheel cylinders will fit. Those are about $11 or $12 each. That was nice. But I decided that I'm sick and tired of adjusting brake shoes and brake drums. I'm not going to do that crap anymore. So I went into my garage, and I remembered that I had a disc brake set that I installed on the oval. The oval's got the hood up right now, but there's the oval. And since the oval is getting all Porsche parts upgraded onto it, I removed the rear discs. And yes, there's only one right here right now. But this is actually a Porsche 914 disc. There's the adapter hub to make it work. I believe that caliper is from a 914. It has an e-brake lever on it. This is an Ebrake cable for a Beetle Type 1. This is the caliper mounting plate that goes on there, and an assortment array of tools. This should be everything I need to get one side set up and working. Now, upon doing measurements of everything, the discs, the caliper mounts, the calipers, the hub, all of that should fit. Should bolt directly on like it was intended for the Type 3. I had a little bit of a concern about the wheel offset. So you can see how close that wheel is to that fender. And I could just slip my fingers in between there. The good thing is that as that wheel comes up, it cambers, so it actually goes away from the fender. So although I was worried about wheel spacing, it turned out it's probably not going to be an issue because Type 3 drums are actually wider than Type 1. And this Type 1 kit, as you saw me measure inside in my Porsche trailing arm video, these do offset the wheels 10 millimeters. But that did not seem to matter on the Fastback. Of course, first thing you got to do here whenever you're going to take off brakes is you got to remove the wheel. Before you jack it up, this is the easy time to do it. Go ahead and loosen your lug nuts. So you get your jack, and on a air-cooled Volkswagen, it's always good to get the jack underneath the torsion bars. That's your safest spot to jack from. This is going to go up quite high because I put the because I put the ramp underneath the other wheel. I did that on purpose because now the car sits level. And it's a whole lot easier to work on when everything is planed off. Get off that wheel. And now to keep yourself safe, put your jack stand in there. Make sure it's locked into place securely. I typically stick it under the spring plate. That makes sense to me. There's a nice groove in the jack stand, and it'll catch on that. And it'll let some of the pressure out of the jack. Boom, the weight is now on the jack stand. Okay. You take your hubcap, turn it over like a bowl, put your lug nuts in it, and don't spill them out.
Oh, fudge.
Okay, you want to go ahead and remove your cotter pin. And it looks like this one from the previous owner that he put in here was rather brittle. Falling apart, really brittle. I've never seen one get that way before. Ice grip's usually good because you can really yank on it and get it out of there. Okay, now this axle nut is torqued down to somewhere between 217 and 253 foot-pounds on a Beetle. And that means it's extremely tight. Now with all the rust that builds up on it and all the grease and sand and dirt and crap that gets in there, it's going to take even more torque than that to remove it. So somebody came up with this ingenious tool, and it's got several different names. I just put it on backwards. It'd be nice if I knew what the hell I was doing, right? It's known as a torque dude or a torque meister or a torque multiplier. So it's got several different names. But you take the gear part, just like this, and you put it, 2 of your lug nuts in to hold it. This will also work on a 5-lug Beetle. Use the outer holes instead. Then you have the wrench itself with another gear on it. And using just an 11mm socket and a small ratchet, you can, helps if once again I do it properly, put this on here, and you can get that nut to turn. And it's going to require, like I said, more than the original torque specification because it's been rusted and it's got dirt in it. There it goes. It's turning. It helps if you can set the e-brake. Also might help if you put it in gear. But it helps tremendously if you turn it in on itself like this. If you try to turn this way, the whole wheel's going to turn. But if you turn in on itself, it'll sit stationary. Once you've got the nut loose enough, pull this off, turn it around backwards, and use this like a crank. You can turn that nut right off. Just like that. Put it in your hubcap. Take your lug nuts back out. And this should slide off. Now we have a drum remover. See all the brake dust inside of it. Okay. We're actually past the hard part. Typically these nuts here, these 4, are 14mm. They have to come out next. And the entire brake plate should be removable. You're going to want to get a drip can, especially on swing axle vehicles. And this is going to catch the transmission fluid that drips out of the axle tube. Once you remove this cover, the gear oil comes through that tube and actually lubricates that bearing. So when you pop that off, it might drip. Next, you also need to remove the brake line. And the brake line, I believe it's either a 10 or an 11mm, on the back side of the slave cylinder here. Of course, you got to loosen up and remove the brake line, which doesn't want to come out of here, of course. Trying to do this holding the camera and everything at the same time. Sometimes these are a real beast. Anyway, you guys get the point. I'm going to put the camera down. Alright, you need to locate your Ebrake cable, and I've already started tugging on it, but here it is. Just right here. You want to pull it out of the body. There it is. It's out. And I just got grease all over the camera. Wipe the grease off of it to try to get it, to not get it on your clothes. Alright. Alright. And this little cover should come out, but you can pull on the entire assembly and pull it out that way too. This little cover we're going to hang on to. This entire brake assembly we can throw aside. Now it's nice to take the Ebrake cable out of this thing. You can see it right here. And pull this bolt out and disassemble it. Otherwise you have this spermy looking thing with a tail that's just a pain in the ass to handle. So just get that out of the way. Wipe everything down. Very, very little gear oil came out of there. You know it's gear oil, it stinks. It smells quite bad. Okay, we're almost halfway there. This rest of this is going to go together real easy. This is your caliper bracket. This mounts on in the place of the old drum backing plate. And of course we have the same cover that we used before. You'll see these, alright, don't have enough hands. There's sides here that are scalloped. These always face down. I'm not sure why they do. It's unclear. I've seen people mount them other ways and they haven't had problems, but that's the correct way. And I put the gasket on the back of it. I've got it stuck on there with a little bit of former gasket just to hold it in place, because you never have enough hands when you do this kind of stuff. Alright. Grab one of your bolts and very carefully start threading them in. Once you've got one in there like that, it's actually not too hard from here forward. And actually, that didn't even thread in. She missed the hole. You never want to miss the hole. Alright, get your bottom ones in too. Now, if you want to go nuts, you could have painted all this stuff before you put it back together. This is not a show car. This is a daily driver. So as far as I'm concerned, it's fine as she is. Okay, 14mm, let's get these snugged up. Alright, you want to grab your torque wrench. Make sure it's dialed in at 25 foot-pounds. That's how tight these guys are supposed to be. Here we go, 25, 25, 25, and the last one, which is really loose all of a sudden. 25. Double check them. 25, 25, 25, and 25. Alright, we're getting there. It's good practice to take some axle grease and smear it on this shaft. Now, not too much, because it's going to get squeezed out. Get it on the threads, get it on the splines. And try to get it covered thoroughly. And this is important because down the road, this might start to rust. Should you ever have to take this apart again, you'll be cursing at yourself when it gets stuck. Take your hub. Now make sure it's a little clean. Clean is always a good idea. Put the hub on. There's a spacer. This spacer's a little beat up. I should have made a video about it, but I was kind of embarrassed when it happened. But when I took the oval to the car show, and I mentioned it in the other video, the wheel fell off. And this spacer was on the oval at that time, and it got a little chewed up. But it's only chewed up on the outside. It's still plenty serviceable. Take your nut, put it on. And make sure everything is cinched up, that this doesn't wobble. If it wobbles for some reason, once you've got that cinched up, that means you may not have all the spacers on properly. You may need an additional washer or something. So you should check the specifications of your vehicle, of your year, to know for certain as to what you've got. Now I take the disc and put it on there next. And then we're coming back to this guy again. It goes on there just like so. Okay, for my year vehicle, I'm supposed to have 217 foot-pounds of torque for a swing axle on this nut. Now, once again, you can do that with this tool and just an 11mm socket right there, which we're going to put on a torque wrench. And I've dialed into 25, which is, it's going to be greater than 217. As long as you don't go exceeding too far past the 250, you're going to be just fine. In which case, actually, you're going to go past that anyway, because once you've got it tightened to torque, you need to continue turning it until the hole that's in the axle lines up along with the slot in the crown nut. Put that back on there. Let's see if we can get it started right here. We got lucky. How about that? That's it right there. We're clicking. I don't think we're quite to spec though. I'm gonna have to double check the tool and find out. And of course my phone is ringing. Alright, I got lucky when I tightened it and I got the hole wound up with the crown nut. It actually tightened to the right torque spec. I double checked it and it just seemed like it was turning easier than expected, but with everything greased on it properly, it just turned easily. I have no complaints there. We need to remove the tool. Get this put aside. I like to put at least one of these lug nuts back on and snug it up, because on these disc brake kits, this might be a Porsche 914 disc, and it might have all the alignment holes for putting in the screws to retain it, but the hub doesn't have any of those holes drilled into it. So anyway, that's going to keep it in place. Alright, we're looking good here. Next we got to mount the caliper, and we got to start getting brake lines hooked up. Oh, we almost forgot one critical thing. There would be somebody out there in internet land that would razz me for that one, but you gotta have your cotter pin. Can't forget that, man. That would have been ugly. These things have been known to come apart. I can tell you from first-hand experience. There we go. One pin on there. There we go. Cosmetically challenged. Now it looks better. Brand new one, ready to rock and roll. Here's our rear caliper. Ba-dum. Now how you know which way is up so you don't get the left and right side switched is you want this bleeder screw over the inlet. And this is important because air is going to rise, so you want it to bleed out of the bleeder, which is on top. That's common sense kind of stuff. You know what they say about common sense? It ain't so common. So you get this sucker mounted. Sometimes you'll have to spread your caliper a little bit. There we go. Oh yay, I got paint in the holes of the mounting bracket. It means I can't get the bolts to come through from the back. I'm going to have to ream that out real quick with a tool. Not a big deal, just one of those things that oversight. When I painted up those brackets, when I put them on the oval chassis, turned out I got a little bit of paint inside the holes, so I didn't want to go in. Alright, so we got the bolts threading into the calipers now. The bottom one can be a little tricky sometimes. You can't really see it, you're just kind of going by feel. Alright, and those are also torqued to 25 foot-pounds. Oh, fuck, that hurt. £25 That's it right there. Now the bottom one, this is the one that's hard to get to. You kind of do this blindly. Alright, that's on. Things that we need to do. One of which is we need to release this brake cable, or I should say brake hose, one of the hard lines. This needs to be removed from the rubber line right over here. So to facilitate this, there's a little clip that can be removed. A whole lot easier with two hands. There it is, that clip comes out. Once that clip is out, the line can be pulled through. There it is. Pull this up and out. Now that it's on the outside, we can easily get this separated over here. I always have a hell of a time with these. Separating it from the caliper, or in this case the slave cylinder and wheel, or wheel cylinder. I catch hell for that sometimes. Slave cylinder, wheel cylinder is the same thing. And I got it free. The reason why it's smoking a little bit is because I actually heated it with the torch. This one actually came apart a lot easier than I usually do. That should come out of there now without too much of a fight. Make sure your pan is going to catch any of the drippings. There we go. Okay, we need to get a different brake line. The hard line that comes with the kit is about twice what it needs to be, and that might be great for an IRS Beetle, but on this swing axle 1968 Fastback, we needed a shorter one. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to set up a hook, kind of a J shape, that comes up and out of here and then goes over to the brake line and then meets with the rubber brake line back on the opposite side of the spring plate in the stock location where we pulled that clip out of earlier. Now this brake line, you can bend it with your fingers if you're delicate. You don't want to bend it too fast, too hard, or kink it. Or worse yet, if you're a real douchebag, you break it. You kind of want a J shape like that, and that was formed with my hands without using a tool, and I'd say I did pretty well there. I'm tooting my own horn. Now, that needs to be offset a little bit, as you can see there. It needs to have a little bit of a twist in it, and it's because this end over here is not straight. It's on a bit of an angle, like a 45-degree angle. Okay, I think we about got it. Now you have to pull the little rubber plug out of the brake inlet. I have a hook somewhere, but it's not with me. But there it is. Make sure it comes out intact. If you leave a little piece of it in there, your brakes aren't going to work. Alright, just thread it in there to get it started. You may be removing it once or twice more, so don't tighten it down just yet. There we go. I think we're looking pretty good here. It's gonna need a little bit of a bend on this end. And it actually needs to come up a little bit here in the middle so it doesn't rub on the axle. I think that will get it. And make sure that when you bend this thing, and I almost made that mistake, that you have the nut all the way at the end. Because if you put it here and you put the bend here, you won't be able to slide it all the way down. In this case, my bends were slight, so it wasn't such a problem. Okay, pull this back out. I'm gonna get this started so you know what I'm getting into here. Alright, and then we need to thread it in on the other end. Hard lines are tight. Just pull a little bit of slack into it. Put a couple bends to make sure that that line doesn't rub on anything. And have a good look at the suspension and make sure that the motion of the suspension, the travel, isn't going to cause it to rub on, I don't know, the shock or the Z-bar rubber bushing. Or you don't even want it rubbing on the e-brake actuator. Alright, we got to put that clip back down in there, which I seem to have misplaced. What else is new? You always manage to lose at least one thing while you're working. It's right here, right in front of me. I just don't see it. Some addressing. What you're looking at here on the driver's side is the disc brake cable. Now this one has all the slack pulled out of it already. This side has the drum. Of course, the lighting just changed in here. Now, that one had to be adjusted to get the length right. This is the stock drum brake cable. And if you're looking, you can see both of them are the same length once I pull the slack out. That's where we had to be. Now that cable for the disc brake setup, this was wrong. This was just entirely too long. The outer wire here, just like a bicycle cable, was entirely too short. So I had to do something to make up for the slack. So what I did was I made a part. And I've made these for bicycle and clutch cables and motorcycle cables and things before. I'll get into the description as to what it took to make this and what the measurements are of it over on my Patreon, so check that out, you guys. But this is the part that makes Type 1 disc brakes possible on a Type 3.
This is what makes time travel possible.
How this works is real simple. You take the e-brake cable, you slide it through, and it was really tough getting this radius right, because if you turned it too tight, you couldn't push the divot through the end. And this goes on here just like that. That's it. And the cable's tension holds it together. Now this coupler that's on the other end will slide over the e-brake tube in the chassis. So that gives me the extension that I needed of the length that was required to take up that extra slack. Alright, I've got my adapter all greased up. I've got the new cable all greased up. And I've got this all put together here. Now we need to get up underneath the car and feed it into the chassis. This is going to be tricky getting the camera up under there. I'm not sure if the camera sees what I see, but we're gonna give this a shot anyway. But the tube is way up here. You want to go around this stuff and not rounding around through it and getting knotted up. Okay. I'll take this cable, come up and around this way, and then put it in the tube. And my adapter fit on there perfectly. Okay. Start feeding that wire into that chassis. It'll probably get hung up when... No, it didn't. Usually they get hung up when they get up towards the front where the e-brake handle is at, but this time it actually pushed right through. Lucky me. Now the natural route for the e-brake cable is underneath the spring plate. Route it around this way. There is a circlip on this that must be removed. And over here back on the caliper, there's a hole where this cable feeds through, just like so. Pull that through. You push the washer and the spring all down into this position and pull it on this side of the lever, feeding the cable around this way so that way the ball end gets hooked in there. Push that in just like that. Make sure all the slack is pulled out of it back here. And if we go up front, and we're really lucky, the e-brake cable should be exactly where it belongs, and if we're really lucky, it might even be poking out the hole and ready for me to put a bolt on it. Oh, almost forgot. We got to put this circlip on back here. Make sure that this is pushed into place. Just like that. Should just snap right in. Let's push it with a screwdriver. There it is. And that's what stops the cable from coming loose. Well, I didn't just get lucky. I got really lucky. The e-brake cable completely came through. That doesn't usually happen. Usually it falls down in the tunnel somewhere. But anyway, that's great news. Now I just need to attach the little balance beam that goes over the top and put the nuts on it. And we'll see if we have an e-brake, and it should work. Alright. Got the cable here, the balance beam on it, and there's one little tapered nut that goes on first. Just like that. On the other side, do the same thing. Tapered nut. I feel like there was a little dirt in it, didn't want to turn. Alright, pull this up over the top of the e-brake handle. Got to put on the binding nuts. These are the ones that tighten against the other nuts there to get everything tight. Now, despite the one cable appearing to be a little longer, it actually looks like, once I got everything pulled up here, that that's not really the issue. It might have just been an illusion. Yeah, that looks pretty damn good. They definitely need to be tightened up, but we have e-brake. Yeah, it needs to be tightened up some more to get it in spec. But this is good. We've got brakes. Doesn't want to budge at all. I think we're in a very good very good condition over here. Ready to start bleeding them brakes. Bleeding the brakes is a separate process. It's probably good for another video. Since this car only requires it in the rear, the front is a separate circuit. I'm not even going to cover it in this video. But we got our setup together. We'll go ahead and get it bled like we said, and then we'll go take it for a ride. Okay, brake pedal felt good when I stepped on it. Time to put the wheel on. Lift the jack back up just far enough to get the stand out from underneath. It's out. Okay, let him back down like this. Yes, the camber looks like it's all screwed up. You broke your car, dude. No, it's just because the still up on the ramp on the one side. You're right. Let's go ahead and take it off of there and see what we think. All right, and the last thing you've got to do, and you don't want to forget, is you want to torque these down to the specification of your vehicle. In this case, it's 100 foot-pounds for me. And it's good to use crisscross pattern. Start here and go around that way. If you have 5 lug, you still crisscross and go around. Once you've got that set, last thing you do, put on your hubcap. Ready to take it for a ride. All right, let's test these rear brakes. I almost forgot it's garbage day. I gotta put my garbage out. Well, the e-brake is working good as I'm rolling backwards down the hill. Oh yeah, working real good. Oh, front tires are rubbing. I gotta put air in the shocks. Oh. Anyway, the camera bounces all over the damn place, but I think it's gonna still get a stable video. I definitely need a different shoulder mount. This one is just way too floppy. Well, one thing I can say for sure is that my brake pedal is a lot higher than it used to be. And you just barely touch it and it slows you down. Whereas before, well, when the brakes were failing, it was going from a double into a triple pump to make them work properly. Otherwise you would stomp on them and the pedal was really, really low and hard as a block of wood. And the front wheels would lock up as I was trying to slow down, and they really didn't slow you down a whole lot. They just want to smoke. Figure we'd take a little ride through town here and try to get the brake pads bedded in on the discs. You probably noticed that the discs were somewhat clean, but if you had seen them before when I did the weight measurements, they were rusty on the surface. I had to sand some of the loose rust down before I put them on. I'm sure the brake pads would have burned right through it, but I wanted to have them clean and decontaminated so all that crap didn't wind up in the brake pads and other mechanisms. Wow, that camera really bounces around a lot. I'm wondering how stable the video actually is going to be. Yeah, these brakes are working nice. Yeah, it's real nice. Oh yeah. That makes me happy. Got the e-brake adjusted properly too. It's about 2, 3, 4, right about 4, 3.5, 4 when it starts to bite. And that thing is stiff, really stiff. It has a very different lever pulling system, so it requires less pull, so there's less mechanical advantage on it. Whereas in the old brake shoes that were on there, which were shaped like half moons, there's a lever, and the lever was long and it had a lot of motion in it. These little levers are tiny. It's little tiny things and they don't have a whole lot of motion, so this thing actuates real fast. About to turn green. E-brake up the hill. Worked out nice. Need to do some work on the shifter here. I've had a little problem with it ever since I put this thing in. I like this shifter because of its angle. Because I'm such a big guy, I have the seat pushed back as far as it'll go, but unfortunately the shifter is so far forward that I have to reach for it, so I have to come out of my seat to go get it. Oh, these brakes work real nice. Everything about this car, every time I do some kind of repair on it, the car just becomes so much better than it was before. Because I wind up addressing things that I didn't realize were problems. You know how it goes. You take apart one thing because you know there's an issue, and you open up that can of worms, and you've got to put all them worms back in that can. And once you do, and everything is adjusted properly to spec, the car is just better than it was. Find a clear space of road up here. We're gonna stomp on these brakes and see just how effective they are. So one thing that the car never did was lock up the rears. In fact, it never locked up the front either if I would stomp on it. Even when they were working properly, when I got the car and I bled the brakes out with the new master cylinder and adjusted the rears. Fronts are of course discs, so there really is no adjustment. But it would still never lock up. And this does not have anti-lock brakes. 1968 Volkswagen, you know, I don't think air-cooled Volkswagens ever had anti-lock brakes. I'm sure somebody will call me out over there and say, well, you know, a 1985 Vanagon or some crap. I don't know about Vanagons being air-cooled that late anyway. I think they had water box motors in it. But anyway, you get the point. for some idiot to pull out in front of me so I can actually test these brakes. The scary way to test them. Brakes are working well. Now let's find us a side street here. I think this one over here. You get down a little ways, there's no houses. Yeah, the brakes are much stiffer. All of my pedals are a lot stiffer on this car. I put a stage 1 clutch in. I also put an extra return spring back on the carburetors to make sure the carburetors close up, so that makes the throttle pedal stiffer also. So all of my pedals are stiffer than stock. And no complaints from me. But I'm sure if I get one of my friends out of, one of the early Beetles that they drive, where everything is nice and soft and easy to easy to work, they get in here and everything is tight, adjusted precisely and functional. Where the hell did all these houses come from? These didn't used to be here the last time I came down this street. Wow. Development. Alright, well, we're not going to go down that way then. What we'll do is we'll act like jackass, pulling up to the stop sign here. I hope these work. Oh yeah, 4-wheel lockup. All 4 brakes locked up. Hell yes. Let's back up and see if we can see the skid marks on the road. All 4 wheels locked up. That was cool. The car started to slide a little bit sideways, but all 4 wheels locked up. Yeah, I can see 4 skid outs there. The back's actuated. I don't know if you can see it. The 2 whitish looking skid marks that go to the right, and there's 2 other ones that go straight. That was from the rear end starting to go. All 4 wheels locked up. Okay, brakes on this car work great. Great. I'm happy with that. I would expect the brake bias on this car to be more towards the rear deliberately, because that's where all the weight is, being that it is a rear-engined Volkswagen. And the idea probably is that you would then use the front brakes, which you don't want locking up quite so quickly, to steer in the event of an emergency, which is the reason why anti-lock brakes came out and about, for people that could steer while they're hard on that brake pedal. And for those of us that know how to drive, you really don't need anti-lock brakes. You know how hard you can step on the brakes based on your road conditions because you've tested them. I've never been pulled over before because of, drifting my car around a corner or something, because I will test the limits of how slippery this road is. And I will know exactly what I can and can't do which is why you don't lose control. Yeah, brakes work really well. I'm quite pleased. Wonder if the e-brake will also lock the rears up. I don't see why not, because it actually squeezes the caliper. It doesn't have its own brake drum inside of the rotor, like let's say the 350Z does. I'll try to slide around this corner here. Oh yeah, it worked. It worked. E-brake slide. Whee! Uh-oh, garbage man's here. I better get that can out. He's coming down the street now. And he turned. Hurry, get that trash out. And then he's not even here. If you like my longer videos about my Volkswagen Fastback, I did a lot more raw editing and gave you a lot more of the meat and potatoes that you don't normally get to see. Stuff that I usually edit out, like hurting myself or the occasional swear word because I get upset about something. So if you guys like this video, comment. Let me know what you think. Well, anyway, good ride. Car worked great. Happy with those brakes. We're signing off.